Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. A heavy winter storm is hitting the Midwest and heading for the Northeast. Joining us to talk about how much snow we could see is AccuWeather Senior Vice President and Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Porter. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Maggie, always good to be with you.
Now, before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about what to call this storm, and maybe the name doesn't matter so much as exactly what it's bringing. Can you tell me where we are and where it's going right now?
Well, sure. This will be certainly a substantial winter storm, perhaps the most widespread that we've had so far this year across parts of the Ohio Valley near the Great Lakes and into the northeastern part of the United States. It certainly is not going to be the most significant snow that some of these communities have seen, especially across parts of the interior Northeast. These are parts of the country that are typically used to dealing with quite a bit of snow, but this is going to disrupt travel. Certainly will be slickening the roads, and there's going to be probably pretty widespread school delays and cancellations, especially across parts of the interior Northeast associated with this storm during the day on Tuesday. So we'll look at first the snow totals here. And it's been snowing during the day on Monday across parts of the central United States, especially Iowa over toward Missouri. That's going to be continuing to move eastbound. And you notice on the key here, we're expecting 1 to 3 inches of snow from parts of Kansas, eastern Kansas and Missouri, all the way towards Chicago and near the Great Lakes and also the Ohio Valley as well. There will be some areas perhaps across parts of eastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania where totals can reach 3 to 6 inches. But then the heaviest of the snow accumulation looks like it'll be across northeastern Pennsylvania, upstate New York, where the highest elevations, both of the Berkshires and also the higher ground across Worcester County, Massachusetts, for example, some totals there will be 6 to 12 inches by the time the storm is over later on Tuesday night, and also across parts of down east Maine. So that looks like the heaviest snow totals will be across the interior portions of New England.
Heaviest snow, interior portions of New England, so up to a foot, or could it surpass a foot?
Yeah, the highest totals from a widespread nature looks like 6 to 12 inches of snow in those hardest hit areas, especially the higher elevations in those areas. And we do expect an AccuWeather local storm max of around a foot. So we're not looking for widespread concerns of higher than a foot at this point.
Now, when you look at the time of year we're in and the amount of snow you're forecasting and the severity of this storm, how does this rank? Is this out of the ordinary, or is this to be expected at this point in very early December?
Yeah, this is a pretty typical snowstorm for this time of the year in many of these areas. And as we track out the snow here from portions of the Midwest and into the Northeast, we'll restart this loop. I think the biggest thing to notice is look at how things will be situated here around, we'll say 7 in the morning Eastern time tomorrow. And you'll notice all these dark blues here across parts of upstate New York and through much of Pennsylvania. That's going to be some heavier snow elements. And in some of that area, areas where the snow is falling at a rate of maybe a half inch or to an inch an hour of snow. And that can be difficult even for the most experienced road crews to be able to keep up with that. So it looks like a pretty challenging morning commute here across much of Pennsylvania, including the Pittsburgh area, getting going over towards Scranton and just especially just north of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania as well. I expect widespread school delays and cancellations across parts of eastern Ohio up into portions of Pennsylvania and upstate New York as well. But look along the major cities here, along the I-95 corridor. Looks like will be a mainly rain event. We can't rule out a bit of snow or sleet to start in places like Baltimore over toward Philadelphia. But we think that the temperatures, both the air temperature and the ground temperature, will be a little bit too high for any of that to stick before it goes over to rain very quickly. Maybe a few flakes in New York City before this will be an all rain event, aside from those few flakes at the onset across the New York City area. But there will be several inches of snow in the far northern and western suburbs, especially once you get west of Interstate 287, for example, in northern New Jersey. But the big cities along the I-95 corridor from New York City toward Washington, mainly rain. Boston, the precipitation will start as snow, transition over to rain right in the city, maybe changes back to snow as the storm pulls away later on Tuesday night and the first part of Wednesday.
So we're speaking on early Monday afternoon. When will parts of the country see the worst of this storm? Is it Tuesday morning? Is it Tuesday night? What's the progression in terms of severity?
Yeah, I think that's a key point. So we've got this at 7 a.m. Eastern time on Tuesday, and we talked about where the heavy snow will be occurring during the morning commute. As I move this along further here, we'll go through the morning on Tuesday and look at that snow has now expanded across parts of interior New England. And again, you see the blues here indicating the areas of heavier snow. This is 3:30 in the afternoon Eastern time on Tuesday. Notice that's west of Boston, up into the higher elevations near Worcester and up into portions of New Hampshire and Vermont, and also inland areas of Maine as well. Further south, you see a little bit of a pink in here. That's where there can be some mixing, even some sleet, freezing rain before it changes over to rain. And then along the immediate coastline, the yellows here and the greens, these are indicating plain rain. And some of that rain is going to come down quite heavy. In fact, we're concerned about localized risk for flooding, especially in poor drainage areas in the New York City area, down I-95 toward Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. as well. So one storm is going to bring a variety of impacts. And as we move this out further, notice as we head through Tuesday evening, the snow is continuing across parts of New England. And maybe that rain ends the snow right in the city of Boston with the higher snow totals just west of Boston, just west of Interstate 495 in the Boston area.
So, of course, that's precipitation. What are you forecasting in terms of the wind? Is wind going to be a significant factor in this storm?
Doesn't look like it's going to be a significant factor. There could be some wind gusts perhaps to 30 or 35 miles per hour along the coastline, but it does not look like wind will be a substantial factor with this particular storm.
I ask because in prepping for this conversation, I saw a few headlines referencing bomb cyclone-like conditions, and yet before we started recording, you said that that might not be the most accurate term. So, is there Arctic wind? Is this a bomb cyclone? Why are people confusing what might be a regular winter storm with those terms?
Well, bomb cyclone actually refers to the intensity by which a storm is able to continue to strengthen. And in this particular case, you need a certain drop in atmospheric pressure associated with the core of the low pressure area over a certain period of time for it to be considered a bomb cyclone. And when storms develop in that way and they're able to rapidly intensify, they can bring heavier precipitation, and sometimes obviously gusty winds can be more of a factor as well. There's one storm system that's going to be arriving here across parts of the Ohio Valley, and then a new storm system will be developing along the Atlantic coast. And it's that secondary storm is a very typical setup for the winter where the energy is transferred to the coast and a new storm intensifies along the coastline. It looks like this one is going to be close to the pressure drop over a 24-hour period that would be required in order for it to become a bomb cyclone. But we think it may be just short of that. Either way, the impacts are going to be very similar, which is snow in the inland areas across the Northeast and into parts of trailing back into portions of the Ohio Valley, as we talked about as well, with a mainly rain event at the coast. And there can be some gusty winds associated with the storm right at the coastline, but it does not look like it's going to be a big wind producer.
Not a big wind producer, but of course, precipitation that started in the Midwest, headed to the Northeast. New England is forecast 6 to 12 inches. I'm wondering, what does this mean for flights? We're past the big Thanksgiving travel crush, fortunately, but are you anticipating, is AccuWeather forecasting a lot of flight cancellations at Chicago O'Hare or Boston Logan or JFK or any of the major airports in the Midwest and Northeast?
Well, there's certainly going to be some disruptions, and that will start on Monday night into the first part of Tuesday at the big terminals in the Chicago area, certainly O'Hare and Midway as well. And then as you look further to the east, I think the big problem in the I-95 corridor with big terminals, big airports from the New York City area down to Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. is more going to be the heavier rain that can tend to, and lower ceilings, so the clouds pretty close to the ground, that can tend to do more, have more impact in terms of delaying flights as opposed to canceling them. But there still can be some cancellations at the big airports along the I-95 corridor, and there could be more impacts up toward Boston. But certainly some of the smaller airports, more regional airports, in the areas that we're expecting substantial snow. For example, Scranton Wilkes-Barre International Airport, and then heading up toward Portland, Maine. As just a few of the examples, there can be a more substantial number of delays and cancellations there.
Now, Jonathan, you did describe this as a pretty standard winter storm, and though the calendar is still in fall, I will say, from my experience as a New York resident, this feels a little earlier in the season to be seeing this much potential snowfall happening in the rest of the state and up in New England. So I'm wondering if you and AccuWeather can forecast out what does this mean for the snowfall we could expect to see in the rest of December, January, and February? Does this storm tell us anything?
Well, I don't think we can get any particular signs from this individual storm. AccuWeather long range experts have been forecasting for months as we look at the entire winter season that snowfall by the time the end of the snow season arrives later in March or early April in some parts of the northeastern United States, that along the Interstate 95 corridor in the big cities, the snowfall amounts for the season can average a bit below the long-term historic average, and that's certainly been the trend over the last several winters, with more snow, as would typically be expected in some of those inland areas, the ones that are going to be getting impacted in a most substantial manner by this storm. And so these are the areas from parts of the higher ground of northeastern Pennsylvania through upstate New York into New England that AccuWeather winter experts and long-range experts have identified as an area that can see near or above normal, above historic average snowfall through this winter. So it looks like it's once again going to be the interior areas. Doesn't mean there's not going to be snow that occurs from time to time, and a snowstorm accumulating snow from time to time across the I-95 corridor. But this one looks like it's going to be an interior snowstorm, and that's the main message here in terms of where we're expecting the greatest impacts from snow to occur. I also want to point out that we're also going to be watching another setup here later this week because there's going to be a reinforcing shot of Arctic air that's going to be plunging across portions of the Great Lakes to the Northeast states here. Great Lakes, we'll get into this on Wednesday, into the Northeast by Thursday, and it's going to be another surge of very cold air where temperatures are going to average 15 to 20 degrees below the long-term historic average during that time period, Wednesday into Thursday. So it's a cold setup here. The leading edge of that bitter cold air can be accompanied by some snow squalls, and AccuWeather meteorologists always highlight the risk of snow squalls because they can be pretty narrow bands of heavy snow that can result in a rapid reduction in visibility. And that is the kind of situation that sometimes can catch travelers on highways off guard because you can be driving down the highway at typical highway speeds, and then all of a sudden the visibility can be reduced to near zero in a brief but intense band of snow. And that's going to be a concern across parts of the Great Lakes on Wednesday and toward the Northeast, especially in the interior areas during the day on Thursday. Behind that, the Arctic air will settle in, and we're going to have to look for this weekend for another potential storm. There's mixed signals on this one. There's going to be a dip in the jet stream, so that could set up a storm situation across the eastern part of the country from Saturday into Sunday. There's going to be a couple of different options with this one, though. A storm could develop and then harmlessly move out to sea with very little risk for snow or ice across portions of the eastern United States. But an alternate situation would be that a new storm develops in the southeastern part of the United States and then moves up the coastline, which would mean a risk for snow and ice once again in the interior sections from parts of New England all the way through the central Appalachians and even into the southern Appalachians as well. So you're going to be wanting to follow the AccuWeather forecast on the free AccuWeather app to keep track of this storm that we're going to be dealing with early this week and other threats for cold and snow to follow potentially as we head toward later this weekend into the weekend.
So it's not just a one punch with the storm coming on Tuesday or developing throughout Monday and hitting the Northeast on Tuesday. There could be a 1, 2, 3 punch potentially with these snow squalls and then that storm that could be developing over the weekend.
That's correct. All reasons to be aware of the AccuWeather forecast and your particular community and be ready for those various impacts that could occur as we are going to be dealing with plenty of snow and cold air on the map. We'll see how everything can come together to determine whether a storm will materialize this weekend or not.
Jonathan Porter, Chief Meteorologist for AccuWeather. Thank you for joining us. We'll have to have you back as this storm develops, but in the meantime, thank you so much for your forecast.
Good to be with you as always.